Herald and News, your news now.
The Herald and News.
Empowering the community.
Basin Views.
Herald and News, your news now. Klamath Falls, Oregon.
The Herald and News.
Podcast. Empowering the community and serving the Klamath Basin. This is the Herald and News Basin Views podcast. Greetings and welcome to Basin Views, a Herald and News podcast featuring interviews with local experts discussing issues important to the Klamath Basin. I'm Kurt Liedtke with the Herald and News. This week we are joined by Linda Tepper, business manager for the Crater Lake Klamath Regional Airport, here to discuss a wide range of issues related to aviation in the Klamath Basin. Linda, thank you for taking time out of your day to join us.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
We will get into all kinds of aviation-related topics, but first I have to ask about the airport name itself, because how often each day do you have to correct people? Because people just call it the Klamath Airport, right? But it's the Crater Lake Regional Klamath Airport.
It is. And when I first started with the airport, it was the Klamath Falls International Airport. So then we dropped and became the Klamath Falls Airport just for concise purposes. And then a number of years ago, we actually went to the Crater Lake Klamath Regional Airport, which is quite the mouthful, but it was done to tie in with a major attraction we have here in Klamath County, which is the Crater Lake National Park, and to gain some additional tie-ins and traffic, hopefully, as people looked at planning to come visit that park, how they would get here and be able to use the airport to do so.
Well, before we delve into issues related to the airport ongoing right now, I always like to get a little bit of background on our guests. So could you tell us a little bit more about who Linda Tepper is?
Sure. So I grew up for the most part in Oregon, moved here when I was not yet 2, so I'm almost a native Oregonian. I grew up in the Willamette Valley, went to Oregon State University, and then on to Portland State University, where I got my MBA degree, and then moved down to Klamath Falls in '95. Oddly enough, my background is in animal science as an undergraduate degree, and then I have my business administration degree from Portland State. So I was looking for a job in agriculture, and unfortunately I didn't find one, but the airport department had a department secretarial position coming open, and my background, my father was a commercial airlines pilot for United Airlines for 35 plus years. So aviation is kind of second nature to our family. So it seemed a good fit. And I applied for it and received the position. And I've been there ever since, enjoying it immensely. It's a very exciting field, always something new going on. And I enjoy, interacting with the public and all the aspects of aviation that we encounter at our airport, from general aviation to usually commercial aviation and military as well.
Well, some of that roundabout stuff, my major in college was aeronautical science. And so I studied aviation, and now I'm a journalist. You studied animal science, and now you're in aviation. So however it works out, right?
Right.
So how did you go from animal science into being involved with the aviation industry?
So, like I said, when I moved down here to Klamath Falls, the airport department position came open, and it seemed a good fit for me with the background my family has in aviation. And I recognize that probably for myself, it's a certain skill set that I enjoy using. So it didn't matter the industry, whether it's agricultural, animal science, or aviation, or even medical. It was a certain skill set that I enjoyed using, which is organizational, business skills, communication, writing, and things like that. So I sort of happily took to the aviation field. And as I got more involved in it, really expanded the different types of duties that I was doing at the airport and became the business manager at that time.
So what does your role as a business manager entail for a public airport?
For our airport, since we are a small department, there is a staff of 6. There's the airport director, the operations manager, myself, the business manager, and then we have 3 operations maintenance positions that oversee the airfield upkeep. So for myself, I tell people that I pretty much manage all the paper that comes through the office. So everything from answering the phones to doing accounts payable, accounts receivable, to managing grants, to public relations, marketing. Those are all items that I take on a daily basis. I'm also in charge of some of the regulatory items that we are responsible for doing at the airport when it comes to the FAA for annual reports, to meet our regulatory or our grant assurances that we have through the FAA. So a lot of paperwork.
Sounds like the kind of role where you don't get a lot of the public credit, but all of the blame when something goes wrong, right?
Actually, it's pretty good. That's the nice thing about working for the city of Klamath Falls, the department. The airport is a department under the city of Klamath Falls, is that they do a pretty good job of, getting employees involved in all aspects of things. And there's a nice balance of being in the fun aspects as well as the down in the trench aspects of getting work done. And so I usually let John out there in front, our airport director, John Barcelou, I push him out in front as much as possible to take the leadership role on things. And I'm quite content to just be in the background and taking care of the day-to-day stuff.
Well, the airport has been in the news a lot over the past year. We all were rather shocked when last year Pen Air suddenly declared bankruptcy, and it kind of threw everything for a loop, and suddenly the Klamath Basin had no commercial air service. That got compounded earlier this year when Amtrak was suddenly offline when there was a tunnel collapse, and suddenly the Klamath Basin was essentially cut off from any sort of mass transit. How has the lack of commercial aviation service impacted the airport's operations?
So the lack of air service is definitely frustrating. There's a lot of activities that go on as usual without or with air service. So we still have cargo flights. We have all the military operations that are going on. We have the general aviation aspects of the airport, whether it's the Forest Service tanker base or general aviation in terms of private pilots getting their licenses. So all of that still continues at the airport, but there is certainly a big element that is missing when we don't have air service. The terminal is much, much quieter. Thank goodness for the upper deck restaurant upstairs. Otherwise, that would be pretty much a ghost town. But so there is definitely that missing element of having people coming through the airport. It just, is a sense of greater purpose when we've got passengers traveling through the terminal and going places, or people coming to the airport for business or visiting people. So it's definitely something we miss, but there is still quite a considerable amount of activity that we go through on a daily basis just with other activity at the airport.
That's missing a major tenet of operations at the airport. So from a business office perspective, how has the lack of airline service adversely affected operations or finances for the airport?
Lack of air service certainly does hit the bottom line for the airport in terms of revenue. We still have some expenses, of course, that we save money on by not having airline service, but that is relatively less than the revenue that we miss out on. And that goes from everything from rental fees that the airline would have paid, landing fees that they would have paid, lack of business for our car rental agencies. See a big drop in business when we don't have airline passengers coming through to rent cars. So it is a big impact on the airport. We do essentially end up having one of our operations maintenance positions go unfunded at that time. So normally we have 4 operation maintenance staff people, and that gets dropped to 3. So we keep that position on the books, but it goes unfunded just as a result of offsetting that lost revenue.
So I know there's been a lot of talk and a lot of negotiations, and it's still an ongoing thing, but where do things currently stand in pursuit of possibly getting new airline service here?
So we continue to have talks and discussions with the airlines out there that would be best suited for providing service to Klamath Falls. And generally speaking, those are the regional airlines that operate aircraft within the 50 to 70 seat range for us. They would be flying to San Francisco most likely, or Portland. Those are our 2 regional hubs that airlines of that size would operate out of. So we continue to pursue any and all airlines that fit that bill. United Express, Horizon Air, Alaska Airlines, those are 2 examples of those. Right now, it would look more likely that United Express is showing the stronger interest of anybody in terms of being able to provide that service. And we're hopeful that if everything kind of tracks, that we might see them be able to come in 2019. But there's a lot of different elements that have to fall into place for that to happen. Most any of the airlines these days, when they're starting new service, are asking the community to come up with essentially a revenue guarantee or subsidy to help them offset their startup costs. So we're kind of waiting to see if an airline is interested in providing service, what that ask from them might be of the community, because that'll be a strong consideration that we think about very long and hard as to whether it justifies the amount of money that they're requesting to get service. Because it does come down to economics, and for them to start service in some of the communities recently, we know they've been asking for upwards of $2 million. And that's a big investment for a community to provide an airline with no guarantee that the service is going to exist beyond 3-6 months. So before we would want to commit to something of that, we'd need to know that it was really going to be a good fit for the community and have long-term sustainability. Otherwise, it's not worth losing that amount of money out of the community to try an airline initiative that isn't going to succeed.
One aspect of it that people often don't think about is, Kingsley is such an important aspect of our community. There's so much interaction, and it's such an economic driver for the Klamath Basin. The Oregon Air National Guard uses commercial air service. It's not exclusively their aircraft that are commuting, service members around. They're also actively using commercial air service. So that lack of air service adversely affects operations at Kingsley Air Base as well, right?
It's true. There are a number of businesses here in Klamath Falls that strongly rely on air service for their business function or their mission. In the case of the Air National Guard, they've got a lot of people that are flying on a regular basis, whether it's students coming in to train or just personnel that are getting out of the basin for training or contacting their counterparts in different bases or going back to DC for meetings and those natures. So not having air service is a big impact to their mission, as it is for a number of other businesses. Like Sky Lakes Medical Center, of course, relies on air service, maybe not in terms of getting doctors in and out, although it's an important aspect of them being able to get their doctors to training. But in terms of recruitment of physicians to the community, it's a huge impact to their ability to attract physicians who want to know that they still have a convenient link to the outside world if they choose to relocate to Klamath Falls for a job, that they can get back to see family, that they can get to training easily to be able to maintain their ongoing education. So it does have a significant impact, maybe not for people who don't use air service. We would get a lot of people that say, I don't ever fly on a plane, I don't go anywhere for vacations. And I understand that. That's, a valid point that they make. But more often than not, they do rely on physicians for care, or they do rely on a strong local economy to make it a good place to live. And that gets back to the Sky Lakes and the Kingsley Field personnel being able to have that air service.
One aspect of airport operations is, of course, security. And there's been a lot of talk about the TSA, both locally and nationally. Locally, while these ongoing negotiations with potential airlines has been ongoing, there's been threat of the TSA possibly removing the security equipment that is here at the Crater Lake Regional Klamath Airport. See, I can actually say it correctly. And I know that's been an ongoing negotiation to keep that equipment here while the pursuit of a new airline is being negotiated. But then also out of Washington, D.C., there's been talk of the TSA possibly removing security equipment from regional airports like the one in Klamath Falls, which would essentially kill the chances of any regional airlines operating in places like Klamath Falls. So where does all of that stand currently?
So there's always a real strong push-pull when it comes to budgets and things like security, in terms of being able to fund a robust security program and yet be able to justify it. And so periodically we do see different ideas come out of Washington in terms of how to save money at the TSA, and one of them was floated a little while ago was, all these small airports where we're, screening less than 60 passengers or 100 passengers a day, they still have a significant amount of TSA personnel there to make it happen, but, so a per passenger cost is pretty expensive. What if we just don't screen them and provide security at those small airports and just have them do it when they get to the Portlands or the San Franciscos on their station. You can certainly see that argument if you were strictly into counting the dollars and justifying them. But I think, as we've looked back at different events over the years where security has broken down, you certainly want to take that risk, I don't think, and have that avenue at your small airports where something could get started to go wrong as they get up to the Portland or the San Francisco. So I think we've seen the TSA administrators quickly sort of negate that idea for any merit as they understand or have heard from airports that it would really not be a security risk that we want to entertain. And that's good news for places like Klamath Falls, because losing the TSA screening services would be a huge impact to being able to offer something attractive for our passengers here in Klamath Falls.
One aspect of living in a relatively smaller community is more people tend to know who you are and what you do. Certainly being a journalist, there's times when I'm out in the community when I'm, off the clock and people come up to me and ask, hey, what's going on with this or that? You can't really escape it. People like the mayor, they may be at the grocery store buying things, but someone is still going to stop them every other aisle and ask her, about this or that or complain about something. So with all of this ongoing airline stuff, how often are you and John, well, we won't say harassed, but maybe nagged in the community about, hey, what are you doing about getting us some airline service?
I have my frequent people that I keep informed. It seems like every 8 weeks when I go to donate blood at the Red Cross, I give an update to the lovely volunteer ladies that are there that are asking the same question. So when are we getting air service back? I have a trip that I'm planning, and I'd like to know whether I can do it out of Klamath Falls. So it seems like, yes, there's a certain amount of keeping people informed, and it's something we're happy to do. It's nice to see that level of interest in the community, and it's always a good gauge for us just how important air service is for those in the community by the number of questions that we get. And it's certainly because air service in and of itself is a complicated issue for a lot of people to understand the economics. It's certainly a great opportunity for us to educate people as to why getting air service these days in small communities like Klamath Falls is such a difficult struggle, especially considering that we had air service pretty much uninterrupted from 1956 to 2014. So, it is a complicated subject, and it's always great to be able to explain to people why the industry that is, the airline industry as it is these days, why the model is shifted, why it's so much more harder to get service back into the community.
So do you have a prepared speech you can basically just regurgitate in your sleep for when knowing that, okay, someone's approaching me, they know I work for the airport, they're going to ask me what airline service is?
Yes. In fact, John Barsalou, our airport director, even made up a little postcard size graph that he keeps in his shirt pocket to be able to give a pictorial representation to people as to how full an aircraft needs to be in terms of number of seats sold at a certain price to be able to make it break even for people, so that they can understand that, the cheaper the seats, the fuller the aircraft has to be a profitable flight, and vice versa. You can charge a high fee for the airline ticket, but like token, your number of passengers is thus going to go down. And so there's finding that sweet spot. So yes, everybody has their canned little speech that they like to give as to what it is about air service that is challenging and what we're doing to try to overcome those odds.
Well, the airport here is somewhat unique in that it also has an active military base. There, Kingsley Airfield is official tenants of the Crater Lake Klamath Regional Airport. So what benefits come from having an active military base, and what difficulties are possibly created by having that combination of military and civilian aircraft utilizing the same facility?
So the Air National Guard, the 173rd Fighter Wing, certainly provides a lot of benefits to our airport. The amount of activity that they create on the airfield allows us to have a air traffic control tower, something that our level of traffic might not otherwise entitle us to. Their enhanced security that they have to make sure that their planes are protected certainly is an added feature to our airport. And we get a lot of assistance from them in a lot of the day-to-day activities that we do in terms of snow removal in the wintertime, mowing our airfield in the summertime, and aspects of just airfield maintenance that go a long way in augmenting our limited staff. So that's a nice feature of having them on our airport. And of course, you can't deny that hearing the F-15s go by every day is an added feature as well that everybody loves to do. So it does create some challenges. There's a lot of people that don't understand maybe some of the security aspects that we have on our airfield, or why there are certain areas that they should not go into. We've had, unfortunately, a couple of general aviation pilots find out the hard way that there are certain lines one should not even accidentally cross, because you're likely to encounter the security forces asking you a few questions and stopping to make sure that you understand that there are areas of the airport that are not public access areas. So it's a learning curve for some people. But like I said, the positive aspects of having them on the airfield definitely outweigh any of the challenges that we have or encounter on an infrequent basis to having them there.
As a pilot myself, I can attest to the fact that we have all at one point or another flown to an unfamiliar airport and maybe turned the wrong way on a taxiway. But having military police show up when making that error is maybe added incentive to do your research pre-flight. A lot of my flying I did down in Arizona, and there's Luke Air Force Base close by one of the major public airports there. And so flying at night, sometimes it was a little confusing. Which field do you not land on? So I could understand, the military reaction sometimes if a pilot perhaps takes the wrong taxiway.
Yeah. And they're super good neighbors, though. Really love to have them on the airfield. They are always participating out in community events. Airport events as well. Just this last summer, the Cruise of Klamath had one of their mini shows out at the airport, and they brought over one of their F-15s to put on static display. So everybody that brought their classic car out for the mini show got to pose their car in front of an F-15. So those types of aspects that they bring to the community and to the airport are just wonderful to have them as partners on the airport.
And maybe an added bargaining chip, too, if there's the negotiations for renewal or anything, and you can say, well, we'll concede that point if you give us a free flight in F-15 sometime.
Yeah, that F-15 flight, those are far and few between. I've known a few people that have gotten them. Those are something special indeed to be able to get granted that opportunity.
So you haven't had that chance yet?
No, maybe, when I retire, I might get that opportunity as a nice retirement gift. But no, I have not received that.
So the military presence also changes operations a little bit. You mentioned maintenance of the field, but I did get an opportunity last year to get a tour of air traffic control at our airport. And it's one of the few places that I know of where there are both civilian and military air traffic controllers working side by side. How does that work?
So again, that was one of the nice benefits of having the Air National Guard 173rd Fighter Wing on the airport, is the amount of traffic that they create allowed us to qualify for what is called a FAA contract tower, which is a air traffic control tower that is staffed by a contracted agency, not FAA personnel. In our instance, the agency that took on that contract was an Air National Guard unit of itself, the 270th Air Traffic Control Squadron. So they essentially have a training mission, much like the 173rd does to train F-15 pilots. Their mission is to train air traffic controllers at the Klamath Falls Tower. In light of the fact that some of those guys, or most all of them, could be deployed and short notice for any reason, they do have a complement of civilian controllers under state contract that they utilize side by side up there, so that if in the event that anyone was deployed, we'd still be able to operate a control tower there. So it does create a unique atmosphere up there with some military as well as civilian controllers up there.
So is the relationship between the airport management office that you oversee and having an active military base on site different? How does that relationship work compared to your role perhaps at, say, like the Eugene airport?
So my specific role as business manager doesn't get impacted a lot by the military. Certainly our airport director and our operations manager have much more interaction with the military than my position does. If I were in Eugene, it would probably be almost the same. I wouldn't have that much interaction or changes to my job functions between, say, Eugene and Klamath Falls. So I do, interact with them on special events, which kind of falls under my business position in terms of marketing or promotion or other things that we can do to help our tenants. But primarily it is our operations manager and our airport director that interact with them a lot. And especially for our operations manager, Joe Getz, he's very coordinated with those guys in terms of their flight training schedules and their maintenance schedules that they need to do on any of their pavement services or any of their facilities, like their arresting gears out on the runway. So he's in close coordination with them on a daily basis as to what they need to have done out on the airfield to maintain their mission. And then the airport director, John Barsalou, is very coordinated with them in terms of their overall mission, support that they might need in terms of capital or just letters of support for anything that they're trying to get done on their side.
One thing that the airbase does every other year, I believe, is the Century Eagle event, which draws in additional training aircraft and it draws in big crowds for big public event. I'm sure that day is pretty chaotic and there's a lot of planning and preparing that goes into that. So from the business office perspective, how early do you start preparing for the chaos that is Century Eagle?
They do an extremely good job preparing for Century Eagle on the Air National Guard side. They've done it so many times in the past that they've got it down to a science what they do. So for our purposes, it's mostly what can we do to help. So we try to attend their planning meetings. They usually get started 6 to 9 months ahead of the event. And so we're there again just as an assistance role to find out what we can do to help them. Last time we had Century Eagle, and my role was to essentially help them with marketing. So we were able to get one of the Klamath County Tourism Grant Awards to help them market their Century Eagle event a little farther afield than they had normally in the past. So my specific on the day job was to actually do a zip code survey of everybody coming through the gates to sort of help figure out where we had people coming from and help us gauge whether our marketing was successful. And, it is a huge event. They probably get 8,000 to 10,000 people through the gates for their Century Eagle events, depending on the year. We have people coming as far away as the year that last year I did it, Australia, Finland, Denmark. It's amazing the distance people will travel for taking good photographs or just seeing some of these military aircraft.
One thing that isn't going away and is on the rise in the aviation industry is the use of drones. Drones are everywhere, and the sales of them annually continue to climb into the millions. That's bringing a lot of people into general aviation, which is good. The bad aspect of it is that it's creating a lot of what I call armchair pilots, people who haven't gone through extensive flight training like myself and who don't really understand the regulations or even that they are subject to the same federal aviation regulations as aircraft are. Drones, once they reach over 0.55 pounds, they are subject to the same airspace regs as any other aircraft. But I hear more and more from people who went out and bought a drone for their kid and think, oh, I'm going to go, take some photos of the F-15s over at the airport, or hey, there's a wildfire. I'm going to go get some cool video of that. People don't realize the kind of impact and reaction they're going to get. How big of a concern is increased drone use over at the airport management office?
So it's something we watch pretty closely. For the most part, I think people have been pretty good about use of drones around the airport. I think it's probably as a result of the military presence that we have on the airfield. I think people tend to think a little more closely or thoughtfully about operating around military than they do maybe civilian. So that's a bonus to our fact. But we just yesterday had a report come in of somebody that noticed a drone operating above their house. They live on the approach end of the north end of the field. And so they were very concerned that, this drone could potentially cause an accident, which, the lady didn't want to see any aircraft coming through her front door or her roof of her house. So you're right. We do, watch for it fairly closely because there are a lot of people that are going out to the hobby stores or the, stores and buying what they think of as a toy and not realizing that there are some regulations that come with that. And again, we're all guilty of not reading the fine print sometimes of certain things that we buy. There are some pretty specific rules when it comes to operating of the drones or the unmanned aircraft. Like you mentioned, anything above 0.55 pounds. It's got some very specific rules about registering your unmanned aircraft or your drone. Operating within 5 miles of the airport, you need to notify the air traffic tower manager so that they are aware that you're operating. You're not supposed to fly anywhere, near emergencies or disasters or anywhere else that you could cause an added distraction. So there is quite a bit of education that happens out there. I think some of our stores here in Klamath Falls, especially the hobby stores, do a really good job of making sure that people who purchase these types of things know that there are some requirements. And certainly the FAA has great websites and information out there. It's just getting people to understand that they need to go look or check websites or read up on it before they start operating to make sure that they're not causing a safety concern.
Safety is the big issue there. I'm one of the few commercially licensed drone pilots in the community, and I'm in close communication with the other commercially licensed pilots here, as well as we talk quite often with the air traffic manager here, Doug Cunningham. And it's really a matter of educating ourselves and keeping up to speed because the FAA seems to be changing the regulations about drones about every other month, and it's kind of tough to keep track of. But we're doing our best to try to be responsible and fit within the rules. But it has been very frustrating to see a lot of people either openly flaunt the rules or simply not know it and just go out and fly wherever they feel like. One of the big things is that there is an FAA established rule that controlled airports, there's a 5-mile boundary that you're not supposed to fly in. That pretty much covers the entire city of Klamath Falls. So anytime that you see a drone flying within the city, chances are it's an illegal flight unless they have a waiver. And I know of one person in town who has a waiver, and it's not me. So there are a lot of rules and a lot of regulations. I think that the biggest thing is that I know that the FAA, they're working on what's called an LAANC, which is essentially an automated system that will allow pilots to almost in real time request and get approved a waiver to fly in certain airspaces. But Klamath was not part of that rollout. And I think the military base being here is a big part of that. I think all of the changing regulations and the concerns about it is no one wants to see a mid-air collision with an F-15.
No. And, it's an education thing, and the FAA regulations do seem to be changing almost every time you turn around. So you feel like you need to go to their website every time just to make sure you're compliant. And we do try to get some stuff on our website. The most important feature on our website is a map that'll actually show you where those 5-mile boundary is around the airport, because that's very helpful. Like you mentioned, it's sometimes new to people or that they don't understand just how much of an area that does encompass of the Klamath Falls residential or suburban area or the city in of itself. So that map is very helpful to see. But yeah, it's, I think we're seeing more and more people watch for those items of safety concern that we have with the drones. Certainly our city police force and our sheriff's department are much more aware than they used to be of the regulations. And so we've seen them step up their observation of drones or what they're looking for when they're out and about around the airport especially, but everywhere, just to know what is and isn't allowed and where they might need to step in and what the rules are so that they're comfortable letting people know where they might be in violation.
With an airport and its operations, there's always the concern about our facilities sufficient enough to handle all of the tenants. And I know right now it's a little bit tricky without active airline service, but recently there was a hangar expansion project that fell through. Can you detail why that project was abandoned and where the airport currently stands in its facilities needs and future plans?
Sure. So a number of years ago, 2015, I believe it was, to be exact, the state of Oregon had a grant program that came out that made funds available for economic development type projects. And at that time, we were courting Penn Air to provide air service. And one of the things that they were potentially looking for was a base of maintenance. Should they start service up in the Portland as their hub, they were also looking for some place that they could service their aircraft. And Portland was very tight on space. And so we thought there was an opportunity that we might be able to utilize the grant funds to build a maintenance hangar that Penn Air would then lease from us. So we applied for the grant. We received the grant, which is a big plus. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for Penn Air to utilize that facility as it was being proposed because they found space up in Portland. And since Portland is their hub where all their aircraft come in and out of, it made more sense for them to do their maintenance there. But we did have some interest from some aircraft maintenance here locally from our fixed-base operator, Century Aviation, that they might be looking for a new facility and that would meet their needs. So we went forward with the project. Unfortunately, this is the length of time that it takes between applying for a grant, and when you do that, you sort of on the back of a napkin sort of pencil up a budget of what you think might be needed in terms of funding to build the facilities. So between that time of creating the budget, getting the grant documents signed, so that oftentimes is a 3 to 6 month process just to get all the grant paperwork in place. And then doing the design of the building and then bidding the building, our project costs just went up significantly. And part of that was just the normal increase of prices. The other parts were an economy that was doing much better. So contractors were essentially not as hungry for business as they might have been a couple of years ago. Certain things like the steel tariffs, we were building a steel building, certainly added to the prices. And so unfortunately, when we all gotten done, we were about $1 million over budget. And while we could have found the additional funding that was needed to make that project go forward, it would have increased the rent to the tenant to the point where it would have not been as economically advantaged to them. So we have gone ahead and just canceled the plans for the project at this time. We still have completed design documents for the building. So in the event that we have a situation where we feel like we can make it go forward again, we'll have ready-made design documents that we can put out for bid. And so we'll still be kind of looking. I think there are some opportunities out there for new business ventures on the airport. It's a matter of just, a number of different things lining up to make it all work out so that we can move forward with it. But the completion of the Taxiway B project on the east side of the airfield certainly opened up some significant tracts of land that could be used for future initiatives. And I think we'll see some additional interest as we move forward with marketing those ideas.
Okay. So possibly future projects, kind of depending on how things play out.
We've partnered with the Casita in the last year to really focus on getting the opportunities that we have on the airfield out to the aviation community. So Casita is now an active partner of ours when it comes to marketing different development ideas that may be available on the airport. And we've actually gone to 2 different trade shows that are marketed towards the business community. The National Business Aircraft Association holds a number of different large meetings, conventions, sort of exhibiting opportunities. So we've made an effort this year to sort of get out there to those with Casita as a joint venture to sort of market those opportunities that we think Klamath Falls is well situated for.
With no current active airline service, the airport for a lot of people in the area might be kind of out of sight, out of mind, except when they have an F-15 flying overhead. Oh, yeah, we do have aircraft here. But our airport also serves, there's a flight school, there's Civil Air Patrol, there's U.S. Forest Service activities. What opportunities are available for the public at the airport right now for people to partake in?
We've got a lot of opportunities, and some of them are ones that you don't even necessarily think about sometimes. But when you get that FedEx Air package delivered to your door, it came through the airport. And so we've got people sometimes that say, I really don't see the need for an airport. And so we remind them that, yes, but if you like to get your UPS Air or your FedEx Air, then you do want to see the airport continue in its existence. Like you mentioned, we also have things like the Forest Service tanker base, which, as everybody has come to realize this summer, is an important aspect of maintaining wildfires at bay. And we've seen quite a significant increase in their activity. But we also have flight instruction, both fixed wing, the regular aircraft, as well as precision helicopters on the field in association with KCC. So we've got those two aspects that provide a lot of activity on the field. You can learn to be a pilot. We would encourage you to explore other things. There's a strong need for aviation mechanics at the point in time. We're hopeful that in the future we might be able to partner with KCC or OIT to be able to get sort of a program going to be able to train mechanics here in Klamath Falls and fill that need. So we also have the upper deck restaurant at the terminal building, which is always funny. People are always like, oh, it's still there. I would thought it closed down when we didn't have air service, but they actually do a very strong business, and there's a great place just to come out and watch the jets take off. We have car rentals on the field that rent. And again, people are like, well, who do they rent to if they're not renting to the airline customers? But, everybody that has a car that goes into the repair shop for a collision or something appreciates having the car rentals there that they can go rent a car, or if they're taking a vacation and don't want to take their beater on the road trip, they can rent a car to do. So a lot of businesses on the airfield that are still very strong and part of the community.
There's a saying amongst the pilot community of the $100 hamburger, which is, we, in order to maintain our licenses, have to do a certain number of flights from time to time. And if we don't own our aircraft, then it means we have to rent an aircraft and pay for gas. So oftentimes you plan out flights where you're going to head out to another airport and grab lunch and then fly back. Klamath having that upper deck restaurant makes it an attractive stop as opposed to Bob's Grill out at some regional airports that the food may be kind of sketchy. The upper deck's pretty nice, right?
Yeah, no, I think they are well suited to being an airport restaurant. They offer basic food that is good and well priced, and so there's always something for everybody on the menu, and the service is very friendly. Great views of the airfield. It's amazing to find restaurants in airport terminal buildings these days that actually have a view of the airfield like they do. Usually that space is given away to something a little more revenue producing sometimes than the restaurants, but so it's a great venue and it gets a lot of traffic.
Well, Linda Tepper is the business manager for the Crater Lake Klamath Regional Airport. Thank you for educating us today on all things aviation related in the Klamath Basin.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, Kurt.